You know what I was thinking about, ladies and gentlemen, in the black community, the majority of black people say that they're Christian. And we know saying that you're Christian and everything with Christianity and how it was fed to us even during slavery taught us to be docile, taught us to, we'll have a better life in the sweet by and by. We need to turn the other cheek. But I thought, what if the majority of black Americans was Islamic? Because when you look at Islam, they don't believe in all that turn the other cheek. They believe in the law of retaliation. They believe in keeping their family structure real tight and together. Like, if you look at like the principles of Islam, they have a very, very strict code about family and sticking together and whatever. I think if I had a choice to say what religion all black Americans would be, I say black Americans should have been Islam.
Don't find a man online. Oh, don't find a man online. You might think he fine and he won't have a dime. Don't find him online. Hey, hey. Tell you he rich. Oh, don't let him tell you he rich. I know what I'm talking about. You might think he rich and you wind up getting catfish. Don't find him online.
Don't scare Negroes today with no badge or no white skin or no white sheet or no white anything else. The police the same way. They put their club upside your head and then turn around and accuse you of attacking them. Every case of police brutality against a Negro follows the same pattern. They attack you, bust you all upside your mouth, and then take you to court and charge you with assault. What kind of democracy is that? What kind of freedom is that? What kind of social or political system is it when a black man has no voice in court, has nothing on his side other than what the white man chooses to give him? My brothers and sisters, we have to put a stop to this, and it will never be stopped until we stop it ourselves.
This is the sacrifice, Ikhwan, that we need to inspire our young children. as the jails are filling up with Muslims because our youth aren't inspired with the dawah that's coming out of the masjids. And they're more inspired by the hip-hop artists and the basketball players and the gangster movies people. That's the reality, ya ikhwan. Our youth are inspired not by us, but by somebody else because our dawah is weak, ya ikhwan. If that's not the case, ya ikhwan, go look in the jail and see the condition of the Muslim.
Salaam Alaikum. Mr. Moderator, our distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, our friends and our enemies.
Bismillah wa salatu wa salam Rasulullah wa ba'd. In the name of Allah, and may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon his last and final messenger. Family, friends, foes, haters, and hateettes, welcome back to the Feachaz. I greet you all in peace and love and no hatred in my heart. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So before we begin, please like, please subscribe, and please share. As you know, we got a lot of haters up in here. And yesterday, this news broke out about Brittney Griner and her coming back to the U.S. And of course, you know, it was big news, you know, but of course on this channel, we didn't really touch up on this too much because quite frankly, family, this situation is really not on the wider scale of things. It's not really that important to the Black grassroots. You know, it's not something that is important, but because of the way that this whole thing happened, we had to deal with this. We had to deal with this because now it became important. And I'm gonna get to that in a minute. So yes, I'm very happy you are excited about the title. Okay, both on the thumbnail and the title of the video, because that's pretty much how you got to describe it. Jazakallah khair, may Allah reward you and bless you and multiply it for you 10,000-fold, brother Abu Bara. Everybody say Ameen for the brother Abu Bara. Hayakum Allah, may Allah reward you and bless you and multiply it for you 1,000-fold. Joe Baz wants to know why not Jack Bauer. It could be Jack Bauer, but Jack Bauer, he's like actually it can't be Jack Bauer because Jack Bauer, he's like investigating the terror. So John Wick is more appropriate because John Wick was an arms dealer. Okay, right? John Wick was an arms dealer, so it can't be Jack Bauer. Wa alaikum salam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brother Kev D. And believe me when I tell you this thing is important. It is much more important. When I started digging into this thing, I was like, oh my gosh, what is going on? So like, subscribe, share, hit me up on Patreon. Let's get into it, okay? So the grassroots, okay? We didn't deal with the Brittney Griner situation because at the time, it wasn't really that big of a deal, right? It was not that big of a deal for the Black grassroots. Brittney Griner was arrested in Russia for narcotics charges. Okay, we didn't deal with it because it wasn't really something that is politically motivated or anything like that. However, this situation quickly spiraled into a political topic. And what we did is what we rightly pointed out that no other country on earth has arrested more people on marijuana charges than the United States. Okay? And the amount of money spent on arresting, trying, and imprisoning these people is more than the GDP of some small countries. We rightly pointed that out. And we left it at that, okay? We also pointed out that, surprise, surprise, the racial disparity of these arrests were astronomical. Okay, so I want to show y'all something. So like, subscribe, share on Patreon. me just show y'all something here. Okay, let me get this all ready for you. Let me share the screen. 1 second, y'all. This is so crazy, man. Sure. Let's go over here. Where are we? Okay, so this is from normal.org, right? And it's a marijuana fact sheet, okay? So I hope y'all can see this, right? It says racial disparity in marijuana arrest, okay? African Americans are arrested for violating marijuana possession laws at nearly 4 times the rate of whites, yet both ethnicities consume marijuana at roughly the same rates. Okay, so black people get arrested in the United States 4 times as much as their white counterparts on marijuana charges, even though the consumers of marijuana are the same in the white communities and the black communities. This is what they're telling you. The black population in the States is roughly 13.4% of the entire population, and they get arrested 4 times more than the white population for marijuana charges. Surprise! Who's surprised about this? Okay, so in 2022, the Washington Post analysis determined while marijuana arrest overall dropped since Virginia became the first state to South to legalize, black adults accounted for nearly 60% of all marijuana-related cases. 60%. Before the state's General District Circuit Court's analysis, marijuana-related co-citations and state's court system concluded, despite black people accounting for about 20% of the state population. Well, wait, there's more. Milwaukee County, Wisconsin District Attorney's Office reported that black Wisconsinites are 4.3 times more likely to be than their white counterparts to be convicted of having marijuana. The worst disparities in Wisconsin were Ozaukee County, where black people were 34.9 times more likely to be arrested, and Manitowoc County, where black people were 29.9 times more likely to be arrested. Okay? And there's something else I want to show y'all too. 1 second here. Try to get it up. Okay, I want to show y'all this article here. Okay, this is from ACLU, okay? ACLU.org, okay? And it says, between 2001 and 2010, there were over 8 million, imagine 8 million pot arrests in the US. That's one bust every 37 seconds, and hundreds of thousands ensnared in the criminal justice system. Now check this out. Enforcing marijuana laws cost us about $3.6 billion a year. Yet the war of marijuana has failed to diminish the use and availability of marijuana. Family, do you think the black community could use $3.6 billion a year? Do you think we can use that money? But the US government would rather spend taxpayers' money arresting you for marijuana than fixing your community, making other white supremacists rich. Marijuana use is roughly equal among blacks and whites, yet blacks are 3.73 times as likely to be arrested for marijuana possession. Okay? Now look at this. In the original version of this report, Minnesota dollar figure under money spent enforcing marijuana possession laws in 2010 on page 158 was mistakenly printed as $94,838,000. Okay, the correct figure is $42,770,000. We apologize for error. We have made the correction online on the online report. Okay. But look at here. Every year, 3.6 billion a year, billion with a B, is spent on arresting, charging, litigating, trying, imprisoning people for marijuana charges. Marijuana charges in the US. So we rightly pointed out the hypocrisy of the US government regarding them finger pointing and finger wagging against Russia. If you're in the black community, you're a black Muslim, you know very well that many of our converts, even after they convert to Islam, they're already smoking marijuana. Even not just the black converts, even the white converts. I've seen it with my own eyes, okay? Right? Because that's part of the culture here. And it takes them some time to give it up. And even many of us know black people who have charges based upon marijuana. Many of us know this. But so all of a sudden, Brittney Griner, she gets arrested for what the US has mastered against the black community, mastered this science. And now it becomes a thing. Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Brother Kev D. Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Sister Tika. Walaikum salam. This is LK. I'm not sure if you're a brother or sister, but walaikum salam. All right. Anyways, when the news started spreading yesterday about Brittney Griner's freedom, okay, I was largely indifferent. You know, I wasn't really here or there. It wasn't really a thing until I started going into in depth about this story, because I started hearing about this prisoner swap, of course, because everybody talked about all the news outlets were talking about this prisoner swap. Then, after I started listening and reading about this prisoner swap, my indifference quickly switched to shock and horror. Very quickly. Okay. Now, I don't watch the WNBA. Do any of you watch the WNBA? If you watch the WNBA, if you don't, just put yes or no in the chat. Okay. I just want to see yes or no in the chat. How many people watch the WNBA? Just put yes or no only. Only. If yes, if you do, no, if you don't. Okay. I just want to know. I'm just curious. I'm curious now. Because I personally, I don't watch it. But I'm not like against anybody who wants. If that's what you like, you know, that's what you like, right? But I'm just curious to know, how many of y'all watch WNBA? Just put yes or no in the chat, please. Okay. So for me, I'm a bit older, right? So I remember when the WNBA first started way back in the day, right? I remember when I started as a league, right? And it was like a kind of a big thing back in those days, right? They were advertised, the NBA was advertising for it and everything like that. So, I remember I can't even remember which teams I watched, but they put it on TV, right? One of the mainstream channels. Okay, so I was like, okay, like NBA is really pushing this thing, like the next generation, all kinds of like really, that's really good advertising campaign, right? So WNBA starts, and I started watching this game between these two teams or whatever, and I watched maybe. I don't know. I don't think I watched a complete game. I think I watched like half a game. I may have watched the complete game, but either way, right? At the end of it, I was like, well, for me, okay. For me, I was like, okay, well, this kind of sucks, right? And I just moved on with my life, and that was it, right? That was the end of it. You know what I mean? I didn't. It was legit just one game, and that was one full game, anyways. Like I would watch, like maybe, you know, I was watching like partial games here and there just to see if I was missing something. But really, it wasn't for me, right? It really was not for me, right? So, but if people like that kind of stuff, is fine, right? I'm not here to crap on athletes or their fans or anything like that. But here's the reality of the WNBA as it stands in 2022. Here's the reality. Okay. There's this movement of largely feminists who are pushing for female athletes to get the same pay as their male counterparts or something similar, or similar in deals. Maybe not necessarily the same pay, but the similar type of contracts. Okay. Or they can be profit sharing and these type of things, right? Whatever. The main point is that they want an increase in pay, right? The WNBA players. Okay. So there are approximately 144 players in the WNBA right now. Okay. And every year, the NBA, okay, feeds the WNBA $12 million because the WNBA, quite frankly, they can't hold their own. So they're basically in debt. Okay. WNBA is in debt. Okay. And that means if these feminists, they get what they're asking for, then each one of those 144 players would have to pay the NBA $83,333 so they can make layups in the WNBA. You get it? And yet they're still asking for more money. So do you see where I'm going with this? Okay. You're essentially getting paid a salary to play a game in what is largely a charity. The WNBA is a charity. It's not a business like the NBA, okay? Furthermore, you know who else plays in this charity? Brittney Griner. Now, I had to personally look up her stats today because I don't know much about her, right? So what I found out is that she's 6'9", 205 pounds, right? Her last season, she averaged 20.5 points a game. She shot 57.5 field goal percentage. She shot 84.6 from the free throw line. Okay, 9.5 rebounds. These are good stats, right? For her career, she averaged 17.7 points. Right, these are good stats by NBA standards. By NBA standards, these are good stats. Right? Anybody who knows anything about basketball knows these numbers are good, right? And yet, still, as you can see, when who's WNBA, It's not just right, because I'm just trying to not to be biased, right? I mean, like, nobody watching because it's a different game than the male athletes. It's a different quality. It's a different style, and nobody really cares that much about the WNBA. Really, they don't. Like, that's just the reality. You can't just, nobody talks about, when people talking about sports, people are not talking about the WNBA or the women's soccer league or the women's baseball league. They're not talking about that stuff. That's just, that's just, if you're playing sports as a hobby for women, it's fine, whatever. Like, nobody's gonna hate on you for that. But I've never heard anybody just in a random conversation about sports ever mention their favorite WNBA team. WNBA is a basketball. Never. The only current player in the WNBA that I know right now is Brittney Griner, and because all the news that come out. Like, straight up. I don't even know what team she plays for. All right? You understand? So why are you mentioning all this, Bilal? I'm mentioning all this because, nonetheless, the U.S. government traded for Brittney Griner. And what did the U.S. government give up? And this is where the shock and the horror came in for me. Okay? Victor Bout, okay, is a Russian arms dealer. Okay? I want to repeat this. He's a Russian arms dealer. He's an entrepreneur from the former Soviet military, and he used his multiple companies to smuggle weapons during the collapse of the Soviet Union from Eastern Europe to Africa, to the Middle East, to Afghanistan, and even earned the nickname Merchant of Death. And not only that, he earned another nickname, Sanctions Buster. I want this to marinate and sink in for a little bit. You, as a government who is looking up for the responsibility of your people, are going to trade the Merchant of Death for a WNBA player? Just let that marinate for a second. Don't worry, we're going to get into Victor Bout in detail, right? Later, but not right now. But I just want you to marinate, let that sink in for a second. That's why when I first heard about Russian arms dealer, like, what do you mean Russian arms dealer? Now, there has to be more to this, right? Now, back in the summer, the U.S. was in talks with Russia for a prisoner swap, and they would see a Paul Whelan and Brittney Griner come home in exchange for this same Victor Bout. Okay, even though this trade is still light, in my opinion, it's still very light, right? It would have made much more sense, and I think everyone could have lived with that, right? Paul Whelan, if you don't know, Paul Whelan is a U.S. Marine who was convicted in Russia of espionage back in 2018 and is currently serving a 16-year sentence for that. But I just wanted you to see, I want you to see how Victor Bout was described by the mainstream media, not by me, the mainstream media back in the summertime when they're trying to make this deal happen. Okay, just give me a moment here. Okay. Serious question: Is Brittney Brittney basketball player really a she? I'm confused. Yeah. She is a woman. She is a woman. Yes. She is a woman. Yeah, a lot of people are kind of confused with her, but yeah, she is actually a woman. Yeah. Now, at least she claims to be. She was born a woman. Okay. So I want y'all to see how CNN was pushing. Like, subscribe, share, and hit me up. I bet you guys share this because we're gonna get deep. We're going to get deep. Okay. Let me get this set up for you. Now, before I do all that, right? I want to read the copyright disclaimer under Section 107. Okay, copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for the purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that may otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. Okay, we gotta. I've been getting a lot of strikes lately, so we gotta cover our bases. All right, so let me get this up here. 1 second, y'all. All right. So this is from CNN. Okay. The date on this is July 28th, 2022. Okay. Biden administration offers convicted Russian arms dealer in exchange for Griner and Whalen. Even this is a little bit on the light side, but still, I think most people can live with that because you're talking about an arms dealer for at least a U.S. Marine, right? And then a basketball player, right? So 2 Americans, right? So watch how they describe this, y'all.
This is a man nicknamed the Merchant of Death. Convicted arms trafficker Victor Boot, currently serving a 25-year sentence in the United States.
Arrested, he oversaw operations delivering enough weapons to launch rebellious solutions and slaughter untold thousands of people. He was an accessory to violence on a scale that is beyond comprehension.
And now, according to sources on that, the Biden
Did you guys hear that? This is not my description. This is not my description. That's the government's own description. I'm going to bring this back so y'all can hear this again. Okay?
This is the man nicknamed the Merchant of Death. Convicted arms trafficker Victor Boot, currently serving a 25-year sentence in the United States.
When arrested, he oversaw operations capable of delivering enough weapons to launch rebellions, fuel revolutions, and slaughter untold thousands of people. He was an accessory to violence on a scale that is beyond comprehension.
And now, according to sources briefed on the matter, the Biden administration has offered to return him as part of a proposed deal for 2 Americans the United States says are wrongfully detained in Russia, Brittney Griner and Paul Whalen. Secretary of State Antony Blinken saying they've offered a deal to Russia, but not confirming the details.
We put a substantial proposal on the table weeks ago to facilitate their release. Our governments have communicated repeatedly and directly on that proposal.
Though the administration has been loath to engage in prisoner swaps to free American citizens, concerned that countries like Russia could be incentivized to try and hold more Americans, it's one of the few tools that actually work. And now, sources say President Biden supports the swap, especially after the last swap between the United States and Russia earlier this year received bipartisan support. Boot is a former Soviet military officer who's been accused of using front companies to funnel Soviet-era weapons into conflict zones like Afghanistan, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, even working with U.S. government contractors in Iraq.
He's a dangerous person. He was one of the most prolific arms dealers in the world. He was convicted in the U.S. federal court of conspiracy to kill Americans.
A far cry from Boot's.
I hope you guys got the gist. Okay. He was convicted of conspiring to kill Americans, and they traded him for Brittney Griner. Now, on this channel, we are not left-leaning or right-leaning. We don't care about that stuff. But very clearly, very, very clearly, there's some extreme politics being played here. Like, so now that Brittney Griner has come back to the U.S., do you now see the enormity of this particular situation? They are describing Victor Bout as one of the most prolific arms dealers in the world. That's how they are describing him. It's not my description. And what has happened, in my opinion, is that the Democratic Party has essentially went all in on this symbolic win in order to secure their left-wing base at the cost of countless lives. Okay? That's what I think is going on. They're all in on this. What you're seeing now is even in Canada is happening. You're seeing these Western countries actually split into two different types of countries. One left, there's no longer one country now. It's these parties who are vying for control over the countries themselves. One left-leaning country and one right-leaning country. This trade makes no sense at all. It only makes sense if you are a hardcore liberal. Party over people. That makes sense. But if you're not a hardcore liberal and you're watching this, like, why would they even make this trade? It doesn't make any sense to me. They didn't bring back Paul Whelan on that. They just made a one-for-one swap. Brittney Griner, come in for Cobra Commander, okay? That's who they traded Juwanna Mann for Cobra Commander. This is crazy. You're talking about somebody whose hands are soaked in the blood of all of these poor people throughout the world. Absolutely soaked. Being released to the government who is in direct competition with the U.S. for a basketball player. And you know how they're pitching it. You can watch all the mainstream media. This is how they're pitching it. This is a win for the LGBTs and the blacks and the women and this is how they're pitching it. How is this a win for any human being, period? How is this a win? You just released whatchamacallit, the Kraken, okay? You just need the Kraken back on Earth. Who knows what kind of havoc is going to unfold now? This is insane. And then you have Muslims, like, well, the shocking thing is that Muslims are signing off on this. Muslims, all over the internet, you find Muslims signing off on this. Like, did you not see the details of this charade? How is this in any way, shape, or form a win? Unless you're a liberal, then it's a win. That's the only way it works. This is so crazy. You also think about who he was selling arms to. It wasn't to European nations. It was to African and Muslim nations too. Exactly. How does a self-respecting Muslim look at this? This man who was selling arms to Sierra Leone, to Afghanistan, even in Iraq, as they said, described as the merchant of death by the government's hands, mind you, described by the government as one of the most prolific arms dealers on earth, was convicted, okay, to conspire to kill Americans. His dealings caused death wherever he went. But somehow, some way, this is a win. How? It don't make any sense. Leave the politics out of this. Just pretend for 1 second that we are just looking at the deal straight up as it is. What in the world, how on earth can any logical, sane, responsible person possibly see this is good? This is one of the most unashamedly reckless things the U.S. has publicly done and openly done. And because, they do a lot of shameless things in private, of course, right? And then they get caught. But they're happy about this. They're joyous. People are celebrating this like a win. They're like, what? This is what the world has come down to now? This is insane. Absolutely insane. Do you guys know who Abu Jandal is, by any chance? Who knows who Abu Jandal is? Yes or no in the chat, please. Does anybody know who Abu Jandal is? Radiallahu anhu. Okay. Abu Jandal. You guys know who he is? Yes or no? Put in the chat, yes or no, if you know who he is. Abu Jandal, yes or no? Radiallahu anhu. I just want to see yeses or no's. Who knows who Abu Jandal is? Yes or no? Okay, so no. Okay, we're going to talk about Abu Jandal for a minute. Radiallahu anhu. He's a Sahaba. Okay, he's one of the early Sahabas. Okay, Abu Jandal, he converted during the time in Mecca when the Muslims were being persecuted. Okay? And he was one of the, one of these people who had status in Mecca, right? But when he converted, his parents imprisoned him and had him in chains in their house. Okay. And he was locked up in chains. And what happened was the Muslims were coming from Medina to make Hajj, or the Hajj to Mecca, right? Because they were in Medina at this time. And the whatchamacallit, the Meccans, the pagan Meccans, heard about these Muslims coming to make Hajj. So they went to go and try to trap them. Okay, but they were kind of surprised at the number of the Muslims, right? And their willingness, even though they're on Hajj, their willingness, because they don't have any weapons, they're on Hajj, but their willingness to fight against them. So they were kind of surprised. So what happened was the Prophet ﷺ, he's there. The pagans of Mecca, they're there. And they start what is now known as the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. Hudaybiyah is the place where they met, okay? It's like a valley. It's this place called Hudaybiyah, okay? So this treaty, in this treaty, it essentially said that, you know, any Muslims that converted in Mecca and escaped and went to Medina had to be returned to the people of Mecca. That's one of the stipulations of the treaty. Okay? That the Muslims would have to return the converts from Medina back to Mecca. Okay? So as they're doing this treaty, they're just finishing this treaty. Abu Jandal, he escaped with his chain. He still has his chains on, but he escaped from his prison. And he's trying to run to the Prophet. The Prophet said something, he never met him before. He converted to Islam, right? While he was in Mecca, just from here, from the secret dawah that was going on with the Sahaba in Mecca. He converted. He escaped from his chains. He shows up right when they finish the treaty. And he says, Rasulullah, I'm here to give you bay'ah and blah, 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 blah. And then you can imagine now, this man has been whipped, you know, he's been chained, he's been imprisoned, and he's running to the Prophet ﷺ in joy, trying to seek refuge with the Muslims. Do you know what the Prophet ﷺ did? Yes or no in the chat, please. Yes or no in the chat. Do you know what the Prophet ﷺ did? Who, if you're familiar with the story, anybody, just put yes or no. Put yes or no in the chat. Do you know what he did? Yes or no? Yes or no? Put it in the chat. Abu Jandal in chains. Okay? You can imagine, in chains. Running to the Prophet ﷺ at Hudaybiyah. Trying to seek refuge with the Muslims as a new convert, brand new convert to Islam. Can you imagine, okay, the Prophet, the Messenger of Allah, he had to send Abu Jandal back to the Meccans. He had to send him back. Can you imagine how the Prophet, how he felt, how Abu Jandal felt? But the treaty had just begun, okay? And he's looking at the bigger picture for the wider society. And Abu Jandal has to be sent back to prison. So they sent him back. The point is, and I'll finish the story in a minute, but the point is that even in Islam, okay, we do not make these types of swaps that are irresponsible for the wider society. There is an Islam which is for the individual, there's Islam for the family, and there's an Islam for the wider society. how is it that a Muslim can look at this as good? It makes no sense. No sense whatsoever. You have basically, again, unleashed the Kraken. And who knows what this experienced arms dealer will do now that he is free and he's back home and he's in Russia. Do you think the Russian government is just going to have him, retire? Is that what you think is going to happen? But it was just a straight 1-for-1 swap. Brittney Griner, the basketball player, for Cobra Commander. John Wick for Juwanna, man. And Muslims out here lauding and cheering that. It's crazy, man. It's crazy. But anyways, back to Abu Jandal, because I know you guys want to hear the rest of the story. And then Abu Jandal, after he gets sent back to the Meccans, right? He escapes again, okay? And he decides he's going to camp outside of Mecca. And he becomes a highway robber, okay? And he starts robbing the caravans of the Meccans by himself, okay? And then the converts of Mecca start hearing about Abu Jandal camped outside of Mecca, and they start joining him. And it starts becoming this big thing where the converts from Mecca would rob the caravans of the Meccans. So much so that eventually the Meccans were like, to the Prophet says, take your converts, please. All right, that's a short version. That's a really summarized version, right? But that's just the rest of the story, right? But the point is that even the Prophet says, he himself, he had to allow the new convert Abu Jandal to be imprisoned by the enemies of Allah in order for the protection of the wider Muslim society. You get me? In order to protect the whole, there had to be a sacrifice that was made. You get it? So now these people who are saying, this is a win, right? They're not looking at the protection of the whole at all. They don't care. It's all about politics. This was a politicized swap, highly politicized. It had nothing to do with the protection of the people. It had everything to do with optics. This is so crazy. So crazy. But anyways, I'll put in a link in the chat if anybody wants to join me. We'll go on for like another 1 or 2 minutes. This thing that happened with Brittney Griner, right? When I was, seeing the reaction, right, of people, because people kind of like, people are people wherever you go anyways, right? There are people wherever you go. But Muslims should really know better, right? You don't just start taking positions for the sake of taking a position. You should actually have some knowledge behind the position before you take it, right? If you don't have any knowledge behind the position, then you shouldn't be taking these types of crazy positions, right? But
I love you too. Well, alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead. What you got?
I was just gonna say, like, this really shows you what America truly values, right? And it has nothing to do with people, but even when you were talking about, the prison system, yeah, it cost them $6 billion to keep those people in prison, but the government made a whole.
That's only on marijuana. 3.6 billion a year.
3.6 billion a year. But they
That's
also
all.
made a hell of a lot of money too, right? Because a lot of the
Yeah.
prisons in the States are also the prisons for income, right?
Yeah, of
So
course,
they made.
but they use the public sector money to fund the prisons. So the prisons are private, right, and they're funded by the public sector. So private companies are building these prisons and getting money from the government, right? And you're talking about $3.6 billion a year only in marijuana patrols, right? So like my whole argument is that the reason why that this is happening is because now Western countries are so incredibly polarized that you're going to see these countries split into like either hybrid countries or completely different types of countries or something of that nature. Right? It's happening in Canada right now with Alberta. Alberta right now has a separatist government for the first time in Canadian history. Right, and the separatist government, they are alt-righters. It's a convoy, a freedom convoy government, meaning MAGA government. It's a MAGA government in Canada. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, so
from a customer, like from a corporation standpoint, like I see it all the time with the customers that I deal with, and then the stuff that goes on in Alberta, because I got to deal with those people like pretty much all day long. So like just from like a consumerism point, like I see exactly what they're about. But even still, like, it's at the end of the day, it's about the bag. It's not about the people. It's about the money that they can get while they can get it, right? And like I said earlier, they're selling these arms to Muslim countries and to African countries. But look at the African nations that they sold to. Sierra Leone has diamonds and tungsten and all these resources that we use, that we consume, that we don't even know that we use half the time because it's in our technology, right? And then you have Afghanistan, who is rich in poppies, and whether or not they want to admit it or not, but the opioid epidemic that's going on now is largely at fault due to the Afghan war and them bringing back all the poppies, right? And so on and so forth. But like
and this is this guy who is responsible for selling arms to these people. This is the person they released for a basketball player. Man.
Exactly. And but what you're gonna see happen is the reversion of what they claim that they try to stop, because they really and truly they didn't try to stop it. They just wanted a new way in so that they can gather the resources from those countries, right? Without having to deal with arms dealers, without having to deal with coups and so on and so forth. And that's all that they did. So why not release them? Like, I mean, I don't know. That's my opinion.
Yeah. But Jazakallah khair, Sister Rabia. Hayakumullah, may Allah reward you. Okay. Jazakallah khair to everybody who participated. Jazakallah khair, Brother Abu Bara. Hayakumullah, may Allah reward you and bless you and multiply it for you 10,000-fold. Ameen. Everybody say Ameen. All right. Jazakallah khair for everybody who joined me tonight. Please like, please subscribe, please share. And we will see you tomorrow, inshallah. Subhanaka bihamdik wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.